Hi there, this is Teresa Martin, CSM Biology faculty, and today we're going to be looking at the nervous system, and in particular looking at the brain and the part of the brain known as the forebrain. The brain is an amazing organ that really controls all of what we do, from sensing our external environment to controlling our skeletal muscles and all our bodily functions, to giving us memories and emotions. The brain functions in a multitude of amazing and sometimes mysterious ways. To review, the brain is a part of the nervous system. The brain and spinal cord make up what we call the central nervous system, or CNS, and then we have the peripheral nervous system, or PNS, consisting of the nerves that bring in information to the CNS, which we call the sensory division, and the division of the PNS that sends out information and controls the body. We call that the motor division. The central nervous system integrates sensory and motor output and provides for things like emotions and memory in addition to body control. The adult human brain actually starts out as a neural tube, and that neural tube is filled with fluid. As you can see here, over time, that neural tube develops swellings, including 3 swellings, one known as the forebrain, one as the midbrain, and one as the hindbrain. As an adult, we have 6 main brain parts that have developed from the original 3 swellings. These are the cerebrum and diencephalon from the forebrain, the mesencephalon or midbrain, and the pons, medulla oblongata, and cerebellum that arise from the hindbrain swelling. All of these tissue areas still surround fluid-filled spaces, which we call ventricles. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the adult brain. As the brain grew in fetal development, the neural tube coiled forward and downward, creating almost a ram's horn effect. This can be seen in the curved shape of the right and left ventricles here. The forebrain developed into the largest portion of the brain, known as the cerebrum. The midbrain structures are obscured here in this picture, but seen in blue are the ventricles of the brain. Covering the brain we have connective tissues known as meninges. These consist of 3 layers of connective tissue with a layer of fluid between them, which provides shock absorption to the brain and spinal cord. The fluid within the ventricles and surrounding the brain is called cerebrospinal fluid and is continuously formed to provide shock absorption, nutrition, and oxygen to the surrounding brain tissue. It drains into veins via projections of connective tissue. This small gap between the meningeal layers is one of the places where the cerebrospinal fluid drains. So to recap, the brain, the adult brain, consists of the cerebrum, the diencephalon, the midbrain, the pons, the cerebellum, and the medulla oblongata. Next, we'll look more closely at the cerebrum and the diencephalon and their functions. The cerebrum consists of 2 hemispheres of highly convoluted neural tissue. The folded areas that you see here are called gyri. There are 2 kinds of neural tissue in the brain and spinal cord, gray matter and white matter. The gray matter is visible here because it makes up the cerebral cortex, an outer layer of gray matter about a centimeter thick. The gray matter contains neuron cell bodies and lots of neuron-to-neuron connections called synapses. There are 2 hemispheres in the cerebrum separated by a longitudinal fissure. Each hemisphere can be divided up into lobes, which are areas of cerebral cortex or gray matter, which has a particular function for the body. Each lobe is generally separated from another by a groove or a sulcus. This frontal section through the brain illustrates the layering of the gray and white matter of the brain. The outer layer of orange represents the cortex, and the inner tannish areas represent white matter. White matter is composed of bundles of neuron axons called tracts. Here you can see a major tract of white matter that connects the 2 hemispheres, shown in green. This is called the corpus callosum. Also seen here as pink and purple lines are ascending and descending tracts that connect the cerebral cortex to other brain areas. Notice that the tracks cross in the medulla oblongata, so that the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body, and vice versa. Lastly, in this image, we see regions of gray matter in the cerebrum highlighted in pink and blue. The pink areas are gray matter areas that make up what we call the basal nuclei. These are areas of the cerebrum that help drive conscious movement. The blue areas on either side of the central ventricle are together called the thalamus. These are not part of the cerebrum, but part of the area of the forebrain known as the diencephalon, and they serve as relay stations for sensory information coming in from the body. In this image of the brain, the lobes are colored differently so that you can see where they lie. The names of the lobes generally correspond to the bones of the cranium that they sit under: frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe, occipital lobe. And deep within the lateral sulcus lies more cortex, which is called the insula lobe. Each lobe has been mapped as to its functions, and while we know quite a bit about each lobe, it's still an area of very active research. Generally, now we use special imaging using MRIs known as functional MRIs or fMRIs, where they can see what parts of the brain are active as they ask a subject to do a task. This is a functional MRI of a person who was asked to think about someone that they are in love with. This table outlines some of the functions of each lobe. The frontal lobe is responsible for controlling our voluntary motor activities, or our movement. It also functions to act as the executive in charge, helping us make decisions that are sound. As part of its motor control, it controls language and speech. It's also involved in emotions. The parietal lobe takes sensory information from the body and processes it to give us perception of what we're sensing from our skin, muscles, and joints. The occipital lobe gathers information from the eyes and processes that information to give us the perception of what we're seeing. The temporal lobe takes on auditory information from the ears that are right next door and processes that information to give us hearing, including being aware of what direction sounds come from. The insula, deep within the lateral sulcus, has gyri that help process sensory information, including taste and smell senses, and also has other functions in emotions and cognition. The mapping that we've done on the human brain has actually taken a part of the brain known as the primary motor cortex, a gyrus that runs along the frontal lobe, and has mapped it to see how it controls specific body parts. We see that in red here. From it, you can see that we have a lot of control over the face, especially the lips, and also over the hand, fingers, and thumb. This makes a lot of sense because these areas are extremely important for keeping us alive. Behind or posterior to the motor cortex is what's called the postcentral gyrus. This lies in the parietal lobe and has been mapped to the body areas that have sensory information coming into it. This gyrus is the somatosensory area of the parietal lobe. As with the motor cortex, the size of the body region on that map represents how many nerves are sending information into that region of the cortex. So for the sensory information, the genitals, the lips, and hands are the largest areas that are represented, requiring the most processing area. You may remember hearing about left brain and right brain divisions. This idea refers to the lateralization of the two hemispheres of the cerebrum, each side being responsible for different tasks. We know that the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body, but it's also been found to deal especially well with cognitive tasks like creating speech and language, and it has regions that integrate mathematical calculations. The right side controls the left body, but has specialization for spatial visualization and abstract thinking. Even each eye sends some signals to the right side of the cerebral cortex and some signals to the left side. This lateralization might be slightly overblown in the popular media, but scientists do know that most brain tasks use both hemispheres, keeping the corpus callosum very busy sending signals back and forth. One function of the forebrain that requires integration of multiple areas is the emotional function of the brain. The structures that help bring us emotions collectively are called the limbic system. This system includes an area known as the cingulate gyrus, seen just above the corpus callosum. Also includes parts of the temporal lobe, the hypothalamus, and the thalamus. This area is sometimes called the ring of fire because it's responsible for some of the most intense emotions that we feel, whether it be anger, pleasure, fear, or love. That wraps up our exploration of the forebrain. It's an amazing region that is thought of as our conscious brain and is part of what makes us unique in the animal world. Thanks for watching.